Hey guys, welcome back to another week. This week we're going to be studying theories of race and colonialism. So it's going to be a really depressing week. I apologize for that. Um, in this introductory lecture, I just want to get us acquainted by talking about race as a social construction and about when racism starts. We don't really think about things like racism having a beginning, but according to a book by Ibram X. Kendi, who is a historian who wrote a book called Stamped from the Beginning, which is about ideas about racism. This whole thing begins in 1453. But to begin with, let's talk about race as a social construct or a social construction. What that means is there are physical differences, obviously, among people, but when we talk about race as a social construct, what we're talking about is the idea that, first of all, the idea of race had to be created. So it isn't until 1453 that people start thinking about, obviously there were white people and black people and brown people before that, but we didn't think in terms of the category of white people and black people. We saw that. I mean, it wasn't like we didn't see the differences, but nobody thought, well, black people are this way and white people are that way. So the idea of whiteness and blackness has to be imagined into existence, and then that idea has to be filled with details. So when we talk about a social construct, what we're talking about is the idea, not that my biology is somehow socially constructed, but the fact that we define whiteness as a thing, and that thing has certain definitions. That all is stuff that is layered on top of my actual physical skin color or any person's. So that's what we mean by race as a social construct. Yes, there are a variety of different colors of people, but we group them together in certain ways, and that is the social construction of race. And then we assign meaning to those races, to those categories. Okay, so as I said, Ibram X. Kendi in Stamped from the Beginning, which I highly recommend, says this whole thing didn't always exist. We have treated people horribly. I mean, probably since at least the agricultural revolution, and maybe even before that. There's at least a suggestion that Neanderthals, who are human beings, were basically genocidally killed out of existence by Homo sapiens. So, like, it's not like we invented being bad to each other in 1453, but we invented being bad to each other based on race in 1453, according to Stamped from the Beginning. It's a Portuguese guy named Gomes de Zurara. A name that everybody should know, but nobody does. I mean, I didn't know it until I read Kendi's book. So Gomes de Zurara is a biographer, and he's the biographer of Prince Henry the Navigator, who's a Portuguese prince. Henry the Navigator, to my knowledge, wasn't really all that much of a navigator. I'm not sure he ever really went on a ship, but he was responsible for making a decision for Portugal that they were going to participate in the slave trade without going through like Arab middlemen. So what he said is, what we're going to do is we're going to go just down the west coast of Africa, and we will buy the people who are available there. And that's what he does. And then that's horrible. And then he dies, and that's probably good. And then Gomes de Zurara is supposed to write a biography of him. And he needs to, because he's being commissioned by the royal family, he needs to write a glowing biography. And so he takes this historical anomaly. We've had slavery for thousands of years, but this historical anomaly of making slaves out of just one sort of a group of people with one physical characteristic. Generally speaking, before that, slavery didn't involve us going and buying people based on a physical characteristic. We bought whoever was available, or we imprisoned people from military campaigns. Henry the Navigator is the first guy who says, okay, well, we're just going to get all these black people. And so Gomez de Zurara, in order to make that seem like a virtuous thing to do, says, well, the issue was that all of these people had in common that they were black, and they happened to be inferior to us Portuguese people and really to all of us Europeans. That is racism. But that's the start of racism. It starts in 1453 with Gomez de Zurara's biography of Henry the Navigator. Everything that we're going to study after is rooted in that moment, which is, it's not good, but it's sort of an interesting thing to think about. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a little bit of the history of our thinking about race. It starts with W.E.B. Du Bois, at least for us sociologists, but the way we're going to study it in this section is going to kind of go through an analysis of, okay, so what happens when people start colonizing each other? And so we will study a theorist. He was actually a psychiatrist named Frantz Fanon. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, although I could be wrong because he was French, so it could be, or he was actually from Martinique, but spoke French. But he's going to theorize about, okay, so what are relationships among colonizers and the colonized, which is often going to, at least the way it played out with European colonization, it's going to be about, it's going to be colonization of people who look different than you. And so we're going to construct a race around them. We're going to say all of these people are this way. It's where we get American Indians from. People who lived in North America didn't think of themselves as just like everybody else who lived there. They were all parts of their own societies. It's the colonizers who come together, say, I'm going to organize and classify all of you as the same thing, and it happens to be inferior to me, and that is your race. So we're going to start out with an analysis of colonizer and colonized, the relationship among them. Then we're going to move into post-colonial theory because in the 1950s, 60s, really 40s also with India, European colonization falls apart. And so, but that prejudice against people who are different than I am, that doesn't fall apart. It just has to be understood differently because we have either given them independence or they have won independence from us. And so we're sort of on equal footing, but we need to not be thinking about it that way because we were the colonizers and we can't just admit that we were wrong. So we'll talk about post-colonial theory, and then we'll move into more specific to race in America theories as well. So that's our roadmap for this week. I will see you in the next video where we talk about colonial theory and the work of Frantz Fanon. Sorry, I was thinking about the fact that I need to make sure I understand that pronunciation. I'll get that to you, and I'll see you in the next video.